They laughed as she scrubbed their floors. They filmed her eating scraps for entertainment. They treated her like she was nothing, just another disposable servant in their mansion of marble and gold. But what the Martinez family didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that the girl sleeping in their storage closet was worth more than their entire estate. What happens when a billionaire discovers his long-lost daughter has been treated like a slave? What happens when the invisible girl the world ignored turns out to be one of the richest heirs on the planet? This is a story about cruelty and karma, about power and justice, about a girl who had everything stolen from her, and how she took it all back. Before we begin, comment below what country you're watching from. You won't want to miss a single moment of this. Let's begin.
Sandra's alarm didn't ring at 4:30 a.m. It never did. She had trained her body to awake in the darkness, before the Martinez family stirred, before anyone could accuse her of laziness. At 18, she had become a master of invisibility. The Martinez mansion sprawled across 5 acres in the wealthiest district of Miami. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Original paintings worth millions hung on walls Sandra wasn't allowed to touch without gloves. But Sandra's world was much smaller. A cramped storage room converted into her quarters, barely large enough for a single bed and a small dresser. She moved through the silent house like a shadow, her worn sneakers making no sound on the cold floors. First, the kitchen, preparing Mrs. Martinez's specific green smoothie with exactly 12 ice cubes. Then the living room, fluffing pillows that didn't need fluffing. Then the dining room, setting the table for a family breakfast she would never join. Sandra had been working for the Martinez family for 2 years, ever since the orphanage had placed her in their work program, a fancy name for cheap labor. She had no memory of her parents, no family, no past. Just a small silver locket she wore hidden under her uniform, a locket she couldn't open, and a birth certificate with a name, Sandra Chen. The Martinez family consisted of 4 people, each crueler than the last. Mrs. Elena Martinez, the matriarch, was a former beauty queen whose face had been pulled so tight by plastic surgery that she looked perpetually surprised. She treated Sandra like a malfunctioning appliance, something to be yelled at when it didn't perform correctly. Her husband, Robert Martinez, was a real estate mogul who barely acknowledged Sandra's existence. To him, she was furniture. But the real architects of Sandra's daily misery were the Martinez children.
Isabella Martinez was 21, a social media influencer with 2 million followers who documented her fabulous life online. She was beautiful in that manufactured way. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect cruelty. Her favorite pastime was humiliating Sandra on camera. "Oh my God, you guys," Isabella would say to her phone, filming Sandra scrubbing floors. "Look at my maid's tragic outfit. This is why education matters, besties. Stay in school or you'll end up like this." Her younger brother Marcus was 19 and somehow worse. He was a college dropout who spent his days gaming and his nights partying on his father's money. He treated Sandra like his personal servant, calling her at all hours to bring him snacks, clean his room, or fetch things he was too lazy to get himself. This particular morning, Sandra had just finished preparing breakfast when Marcus stumbled downstairs, still drunk from the previous night. "Coffee, now," he barked, not looking at her. "Yes, sir," she whispered, pouring him a cup with steady hands despite her exhaustion. He took one sip and spat it back into the cup. "Are you trying to poison me? This is disgusting! Make it again!" The coffee was perfect. Sandra had made it exactly the way he liked it. She always did. But perfection was never the point. Cruelty was. She poured the coffee down the sink and started again. her hands trembling slightly. As she worked, Marcus scrolled through his phone, then suddenly laughed. "Hey, Isabella!" he shouted upstairs. "Come here! I have the funniest idea for your channel!" Sandra's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever came from Marcus's funny ideas. Isabella appeared moments later, camera already in hand, her eyes lighting up with malicious excitement. "What?" she asked eagerly. Marcus grinned. "Let's do a day in the life of our maid. Show your followers how the other half lives."
"Oh my God, yes!" Isabella squealed, already positioning her phone. "My followers will eat this up. It's like poverty tourism, but make it educational." Sandra's heart hammered in her chest. "Please, Miss Isabella, I have work to do." "Exactly," Isabella interrupted, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. "We're documenting your work. Smile, Sandra, you're about to be famous." For the next 3 hours, Isabella followed Sandra through the mansion, narrating her misery like a nature documentary. She filmed Sandra scrubbing toilets, her hands raw and red. She zoomed in on Sandra's threadbare uniform, making jokes about thrift store chic. She even filmed Sandra eating her lunch, a small portion of leftover rice, in the storage room that served as her bedroom. "This is where she lives, you guys," Isabella whispered to the camera, panning across the tiny space. "No window, no bathroom. It's literally a closet. But hey, at least she has a roof over her head, right? We're basically philanthropists." The comments started flooding in immediately. Most were sympathetic to Sandra, but Isabella only read the cruel ones aloud. "It looks like she's dirty. Does she even shower? Oh my God, that's savage." Sandra felt something inside her crack. She had endured 2 years of abuse in silence, but this public humiliation was different. Thousands of strangers were now laughing at her pain. When Isabella finally got bored and left, Sandra collapsed on her small bed, her body shaking with silent sobs. She clutched the silver locket around her neck, the only thing in the world that was truly hers. She didn't know that Isabella's video was about to go viral for all the wrong reasons. She didn't know that millions of people were watching, and among them was someone who recognized that locket. Someone who had been searching for 18 years.
3,000 miles away, in a sleek Manhattan penthouse, James Chen sat in his home office, unable to sleep. At 52, he was one of the most powerful men in America, a tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized artificial intelligence. Forbes estimated his net worth at $47 billion. But all his money couldn't buy the one thing he wanted most: his daughter. 18 years ago, James's wife Linda had died in a car accident when their baby girl was only 6 months old. James had been traveling for business, and Linda had been driving to visit her sister. The crash had been catastrophic. Linda died instantly. But the baby's body was never found. The police had searched the wreckage, the surrounding woods, the nearby river. Nothing. In the chaos following the accident, someone had taken his daughter. The investigation went cold. Years passed. Most people told James to accept that she was gone. He never did. James had spent millions on private investigators, search teams, age progression technology. He'd followed countless false leads across the country. Every few months, someone would contact him claiming to be his daughter or to know where she was. Every time, his hope would flare, then die when the DNA test came back negative. Tonight, he couldn't sleep because tomorrow marked 18 years since the accident. 18 years of searching. 18 years of an empty hole in his heart that nothing could fill. His assistant Margaret had tried to convince him to take a sleeping pill. Instead, he was mindlessly scrolling through social media, torturing himself by looking at posts from strangers with their daughters, graduation photos, wedding pictures, mundane moments he would never have. That's when Isabella Martinez's video appeared on his feed.
The algorithm had tagged it as trending and controversial. The caption read, "A day in the life of my maid, reality check." James almost scrolled past it, but then he saw her face. James's hand froze on his phone screen. The girl in the video, thin, exhausted, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, looked nothing like the baby he'd lost. But there was something about her eyes, the shape of her face, that made his breath catch. He watched the entire video, his jaw clenching tighter with each passing second. The cruelty, the humiliation, the tiny closet they called her room. Rage built in his chest like a storm. Then, at the 8-minute mark, the camera zoomed in on the girl as she ate her meager lunch. And there, clearly visible against her collarbone, was a silver locket. James's heart stopped. He paused the video, zoomed in, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. The locket was tarnished with age, but the design was unmistakable. A lotus flower with 7 petals, custom made by a jeweler in Hong Kong. He had given it to Linda when their daughter was born. Inside were 2 tiny photos, one of him, one of Linda. The locket had a special mechanism, designed so that only someone who knew the secret could open it. His daughter had been wearing that locket the night of the accident. "Margaret!" James shouted, his voice cracking with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Margaret!" His assistant rushed in, alarmed. "Mr. Chen, what's wrong?" "Find her," James said, his voice shaking as he thrust the phone toward Margaret. "Find this girl, now. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find her." Margaret looked at the screen, then at her employer's face, and saw something she hadn't seen in 18 years. Hope. Within 30 minutes, James had assembled a team. His head of security, his personal lawyer, his most trusted private investigator, and Margaret. They traced Isabella's social media accounts, identified the Martinez family, found their address in Miami. "Sir," his investigator said carefully, "we should be cautious. We've had false alarms before." "That's my daughter's locket," James interrupted, his voice steel. "I'm certain." "Then we'll need a DNA test to be absolutely—" "Book my jet," James said, standing. "We leave in 2 hours."
The next morning, Sandra woke to chaos. Angry voices echoed through the mansion. Mrs. Martinez shrieking, Mr. Martinez shouting, and underneath it all, a calm, cold voice Sandra had never heard before. She crept out of her room, her heart pounding. In the grand foyer stood 5 people in expensive suits. At the center was a distinguished Asian man in his 50s, his presence commanding despite his silence. His eyes were scanning the room with laser focus. "You cannot just barge into my home," Mrs. Martinez shrieked. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," the man said calmly. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in your labor law violations. Employing a minor without proper documentation, paying below minimum wage, housing her in conditions that violate health codes." "Who the hell are you?" Robert Martinez demanded. "My name is James Chen." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sandra, isolated as she was, recognized that name. James Chen. The billionaire, the tech genius, one of the richest men in the world. "I'm here for my daughter," James continued, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable authority. Mrs. Martinez's face twisted in confusion. "Your daughter? We don't have your—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she turned toward the hallway where Sandra stood frozen. James followed her gaze. When his eyes locked on Sandra, his carefully maintained composure cracked. His breath hitched. Tears filled his eyes. "Sandra," he whispered. Sandra stepped back, terrified and confused. I don't understand." "The locket," James said, moving toward her slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "May I see your locket?" With trembling hands, Sandra pulled the silver chain from under her uniform. James's lawyer stepped forward with gloved hands, examining it closely. "Mr. Chen," the lawyer said quietly, "it matches the description exactly, serial number etched on the back clasp." "No," Mrs. Martinez said, her voice rising in panic. "No, this is ridiculous. She's an orphan, from the state program. There's been a mistake." "The only mistake," James said, his voice turning to ice as he looked at her, "was thinking you could treat my daughter like a slave and face no consequences."
"I'm not," Sandra's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I'm not your daughter. There's been a mistake. I'm nobody." James's face softened with a pain so profound it made Sandra's chest ache. "You're not nobody. You're everything." His lawyer opened a tablet, pulling up documents. Sandra Chen, born March 15th, 18 years ago, at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, daughter of James Chen and Linda Chen. He showed her a birth certificate, her real one, not the fake document the orphanage had given her. Sandra's knees buckled. Margaret, James's assistant, caught her gently. "The car accident," James continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother died that night, but you survived. Someone took you from the scene. We never knew who or why. The trail went cold. You ended up in the system under a false identity." "But how?" Sandra couldn't form the words. "Isabella's video went viral," Margaret explained gently. "Your father saw the locket. It was custom made, one of a kind. He gave it to your mother when you were born." James carefully approached Sandra. "May I?" He gestured to the locket. With shaking hands, Sandra nodded. James's fingers found a tiny mechanism on the side, a pattern Sandra had never noticed. He pressed 3 points in sequence: the top pedal, the bottom left, then the center. There was a soft click. The locket opened. Inside were 2 faded photographs, protected by glass. A younger James Chen smiled from one side. A beautiful Asian woman, Sandra's mother, smiled from the other. Sandra stared at the woman's face and saw her own eyes looking back. "Mom," she whispered, the word foreign on her tongue. Behind them, Mrs. Martinez had gone pale. "We didn't know," she stammered. "The orphanage said she was... We thought..." "You thought she was nobody, so you worked her like a dog, fed her scraps, humiliated her on the internet for entertainment." Isabella had appeared on the stairs, her phone in hand, face drained of color. Marcus stood beside her, for once speechless. "I've already spoken with my legal team," James continued coldly. "You'll be hearing from them. Labor exploitation, child abuse, human trafficking." "Trafficking?" Robert Martinez shouted. "Now wait just a minute. You housed a minor in a storage closet and paid her $3 an hour. That meets the legal definition."
The Martinez family's world collapsed in real time. Robert's phone began buzzing incessantly. His business partners, board members, investors. News traveled fast in their social circle. Robert Martinez's company had employed the secret daughter of a tech billionaire as slave labor. The optics were catastrophic. Isabella's phone was exploding too, but for different reasons. The video she'd posted to mock Sandra had been screen-recorded and reshared millions of times. But now, people knew the truth. The comments were vicious. "You tortured a billionaire's daughter and posted it online? Are you insane? This family is disgusting. I hope they lose everything. That poor girl. Someone start a GoFundMe. Oh wait, her dad is worth $47 billion. Karma is real, folks." Marcus had gone white as a sheet, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd done. All those times he'd screamed at Sandra, worked her like a servant, mocked her poverty. He'd been tormenting one of the richest heirs in the world.
Mr. Chen, Elena Martinez said, her voice taking on a sickly sweet tone as she tried to salvage the situation. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Sandra has been like family to us. Family. Sandra's voice cut through the room, stronger than anyone had ever heard it. Everyone turned to look at her. You made me sleep in a closet. You fed me garbage while your dogs ate steak. Isabella filmed me for entertainment like I was an animal in a zoo. I scrubbed your toilets. I washed your clothes. I worked 18-hour days, and you never once said thank you. You never once treated me like a human being. James moved beside his daughter, his hand gently touching her shoulder in support. Sandra looked at Isabella directly. You asked your followers to comment what country they were watching from. Well, millions of them watched you humiliate me. And now, millions of them know exactly who you are. Isabella's face crumpled. Her influencer career, her entire identity was destroyed. Brands were already dropping her. Her followers were mass unfollowing. Her comments were disabled because the backlash was so severe. I want to press charges, Sandra said quietly, looking up at her father. Consider it done. His legal team stepped forward with documents. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, you're being sued for labor violations, negligence, emotional distress, and defamation. Ms. Isabella Martinez and Mr. Marcus Martinez are named as co-defendants. The criminal investigation begins today, added his head of security, a former FBI agent. I suggest you hire very good lawyers.
1 week later, Sandra stood in front of a full-length mirror in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park. The girl staring back at her was unrecognizable. Gone was the threadbare uniform, replaced by designer clothes that fit perfectly. Her hair, professionally styled, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was the light that had returned to her eyes. Ready? James asked softly from the doorway. Sandra turned to face the man who was still a stranger, yet felt like home. I'm nervous. You don't have to do the press conference if you don't want to. We can handle this privately. No, Sandra said firmly. People need to hear the truth. Not just about me, about all the others who are still invisible. The press conference was held in the Chen Corporation headquarters. Every major news outlet was present. James had initially wanted to shield Sandra from the media circus, but she'd insisted. She had a voice now, and she intended to use it. They sat together at a table, cameras flashing. James spoke first, his voice steady but emotional, recounting the 18-year search for his daughter, the miracle of finding her, and the horror of discovering how she'd been treated. Then it was Sandra's turn. My name is Sandra Chen. For 2 years, I believed I was nobody. I believed I deserved to be treated the way the Martinez family treated me. I want to thank everyone who saw Isabella's video and spoke up. Your outrage gave me courage. She paused, gathering strength. But I'm not the only one. Right now, there are thousands of young people trapped in situations like mine. Domestic workers without rights, teenagers exploited by wealthy families, children working in conditions that would horrify you. They're invisible because we don't want to see them. Sandra looked directly into the cameras. I'm using my voice and my father's resources to change that. Today, we're announcing the Sandra Chen Foundation for Exploited Workers. We'll provide legal aid, safe housing, education, and job training for anyone escaping abusive work situations. The room erupted in applause. A reporter raised his hand. Sandra, have you spoken to the Martinez family since you left? Sandra's expression hardened. No, and I don't intend to. They're facing criminal charges and multiple lawsuits. Justice will be served. What about forgiveness? Another reporter asked. Sandra considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something they've earned. They're not sorry for what they did. They're sorry they got caught. There's a difference.
6 months later, Sandra stood in the grand ballroom of the Chen estate, surrounded by 200 people whose lives had been transformed by her foundation. Former domestic workers, rescued trafficking victims, young people who'd escaped exploitation, all dressed in their finest, celebrating their freedom. The Martinez family had lost everything. Robert's company had filed for bankruptcy after partners pulled out and lawsuits drained their accounts. Their mansion was seized to pay settlements.
Elena's social circle had abandoned her completely. Isabella's influencer career was destroyed. She couldn't show her face online without facing backlash. Marcus had been forced to get his first real job, working minimum wage at a warehouse. The criminal trials were ongoing, but the civil suits had already been settled. Sandra had won, though the money meant nothing to her now. She'd donated every penny to her foundation. James approached, pride shining in his eyes. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Sandra smiled, touching the locket she still wore, now polished and gleaming. She'd added a new photo inside, her father on one side, her mother on the other, and a tiny picture of herself in the center, past, present, and future united. "Speech time," Margaret whispered, gesturing to the microphone. Sandra took the stage, looking out at the faces of survivors who'd become fighters, victims who'd become victors. "I was told I was nothing. I was treated like I was invisible, but the truth is, we're never really invisible. Someone is always watching. Someone always sees. The question is, will they speak up?" She thought of that viral video, the one that had changed everything. Sometimes our darkest moments become our greatest opportunities. My humiliation became my liberation. My pain became my purpose. Sandra's voice grew stronger. "To everyone who's ever been treated as less than human, you are seen. You matter. Your story matters. And if you're still in the shadows, hold on. Your dawn is coming." The ballroom erupted in applause, but Sandra's eyes were on her father, who was wiping away tears. That night, as Sandra prepared for bed, in her beautiful room with its panoramic city views, she caught her reflection in the window. The girl who'd once slept in a closet now lived in a palace. But more importantly, the girl who'd once believed she was worthless now knew her value. She opened her laptop and checked the foundation's website. 300 new applications for help had come in today alone. 300 people reaching out from the darkness, hoping for light. Sandra smiled and got to work. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all: your past doesn't define you. Your response to it does. And Sandra Chen, once invisible, once broken, once lost, had chosen to shine. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Remember, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Choose kindness, always. Comment below. What would you have done in Sandra's position? Would you have forgiven the Martinez family?